When billionaire Lucas Grant lay dying in his private ICU, the world's best doctors declared him beyond saving. But salvation came from the most unlikely source: a night shift janitor with a devastating secret and surgical skills that could either save his life or destroy them both forever. *K. Dignity Story Z family, get ready for a tale full of romance, surprises, and all the feels. You don't want to miss this one. Let's dive in. The machines breathed for Lucas Grant while his empire crumbled in real time on the trading floor 30 stories below. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Mount Sinai's private wing, the city sparkled like broken glass against the December night, each light a reminder of everything he was about to lose. His father, Richard, pressed weathered palms against the glass, watching Grant Corporation's stock price plummet on his phone screen with each leaked report about his son's condition. "The Tokyo markets open in 6 hours," Richard whispered, his voice hollow as a tomb. "If word gets out before then," the attending physician, Dr. Chen, removed his stethoscope with the practiced detachment of someone who had delivered this news too many times. "Mr. Grant, your son's heart is failing. The artificial valve we installed 5 years ago has completely deteriorated. Without immediate transplant surgery, he has perhaps 48 hours. Then find a heart." Richard's words cut through the antiseptic air like a blade. "Sir, there are 3,000 people ahead of him on the waiting list. Lucas's blood type is rare, and his body has already rejected 2 previous attempts at mechanical intervention. Even if we found a match tonight by 1. The words hung in the sterile air like a curse. Dr. Chen's face went rigid. "Mr. Grant, that's not how everything has a price. Name it. There is no price for what your son needs. This isn't a business negotiation. This is medicine." Richard turned from the window, his eyes blazing with the fury of a man who had spent 70 years believing money could solve anything. "Then you're telling me that my son, the heir to a $40 billion empire, will die because of paperwork?" The heart monitor's steady beep seemed to mock them both. Lucas lay motionless beneath white sheets, his face the color of old marble, tubes and wires connecting him to machines that hummed with quiet desperation. At 32, he looked ancient. As if the weight of his inheritance had finally crushed the life from his bones, Dr. Chen gathered his charts. "I'll check on the transplant list again, but Mr. Grant, you need to prepare yourself. Start making arrangements." The door closed with a soft click, leaving Richard alone with his dying son and the weight of his own helplessness. He reached for Lucas's hand, finding it cold as winter stone. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm sorry I taught you to believe in money more than miracles." In the hallway outside, the night cleaning crew moved like shadows through the corridors. Most of the staff avoided this wing after visiting hours, leaving only the essential personnel and the janitors to witness the quiet desperation of the ultra-wealthy facing their own mortality. Maya Rodriguez pushed her cart past the ICU, her footsteps muffled by worn sneakers that had carried her. Through 3 years of night shifts in this gleaming palace of healing, she had learned to move invisibly through these halls, to clean around grief and hope without disturbing either. But tonight, something made her pause outside room 1247, through the glass panel. She saw the old man hunched over the hospital bed, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She had seen him before, recognized him from the business magazines left behind in waiting rooms. Richard Grant, the man whose name adorned half the skyscrapers visible from these windows. Now he looked like any other father watching his child slip away. Her fingers traced the edge of her cleaning cart, finding the hidden compartment where she kept her real tools. Not the mops and disinfectant the hospital provided, but the knowledge she had spent 15 years acquiring in the shadows of the medical world. The skills her grandmother had passed down through whispered lessons in their cramped apartment. In Queens, Maya had sworn she would never use them again. It's not after what happened in Caracas. It's not after the price she had paid for playing God with broken hearts. But as she watched Richard Grant cradle his son's lifeless hand, something inside her chest cracked open like a fault line. The same thing that had driven her to medical school before her world collapsed. The same thing that made her volunteer at the free clinic on her days off, even though her official medical license lay buried beneath a mountain of legal complications and family shame. She knocked softly on the glass. Richard looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. Through the intercom, his voice sounded hollow. "We're not accepting visitors." Maya pressed her badge against the glass. "I'm not visiting, Mr. Grant. I'm here to save your son's life." The old man stared at her for a long moment, taking in her janitor's uniform, her calloused hands, the quiet certainty in her dark eyes. In any other circumstance, he would have called security. But desperation had a way of stripping away prejudice, leaving only the raw human need to believe in impossible things. "You're a cleaner. I'm a surgeon," Maya said quietly. "And your son is dying because everyone in this hospital is too afraid to try what needs to be done." Richard's hand trembled as he reached for the door handle, knowing that opening it would either save his son's life or destroy what remained of his own sanity. The city held its breath outside the windows, waiting to see if money could finally buy a miracle, or if salvation would come from the most unlikely source of all. The door opened with the soft hiss of pressurized air, and Maya stepped into the ICU like she was entering a cathedral. The machines sang their electronic hymns around Lucas Grant's bed, while his father watched her with the desperate hope of a drowning man glimpsing distant shore. "You have exactly 60 seconds to convince me you're not insane," Richard said, his voice brittle as ice. "Then I call security and have you removed from this building forever." Maya moved to the bedside with practiced efficiency, her eyes scanning the monitors. The medication drips, the complex web of tubes keeping Lucas alive. Her fingers found his wrist, checking for a pulse that barely whispered beneath paper thin. "Skin, your son doesn't need a transplant," she said, her voice steady as stone. "He needs a complete reconstruction of his mitral valve, using a technique that won't be approved by the FDA for another 5 years. Richard's breath caught. "You're talking about experimental surgery?" "I'm talking about saving his life." Maya pulled a small penlight from her pocket, checking Lucas's pupil response. "The procedure exists. I developed it myself during my cardiothoracic residency in Venezuela. But after what happened there, I can never practice medicine officially." Again, the heart monitor's rhythm seemed to falter, as if Lucas could hear them discussing his fate. Richard moved closer, studying Maya's face in the harsh fluorescent light. Beneath the janitor's uniform and tired eyes, he saw something that made his chest tight with recognition. The same haunted look he had seen in his own mirror after his wife died, the weight of carrying impossible knowledge. "What happened in Venezuela?" Maya's hand stilled on the bedrail. "I saved a child's life using an unauthorized technique. The hospital administration called it reckless endangerment. The family called it a miracle. The medical board called it grounds for permanent suspension. So you came here to mop floors." "I came here to disappear." Her voice dropped too barely above a whisper. "But your son is dying from the exact same condition. I'm the only person in this hemisphere who knows how to fix it." Richard studied her face, searching for the lie that would let him dismiss her as another desperate fraud. Instead, he found the kind of quiet certainty that reminded him of his wife in her final days, when she had looked at him and said she wasn't afraid because some things were worth believing in. The risks. "Hi, if I'm wrong, he dies on the table instead of in this bed. If I'm right, he lives. But the surgery will leave evidence that I've practiced medicine without a license. They'll send me to prison, and if you do nothing..." Maya's eyes met his across the bed where Lucas lay suspended between life and death. "Then you bury your son, and I spend the rest of my life knowing I could have prevented it." The machines continued their endless vigil, marking time and electronic heartbeats while the city turned outside the windows. Richard thought about all the times he had made impossible decisions, bet entire fortunes on instinct and arithmetic, trusted his judgment when everyone else called him crazy. What do you need? An operating room? Surgical equipment? And 6 hours without interruption. The hospital has a private surgical suite on the 15th floor. Your family donated $10 million to build it. 3 years ago, Maya's voice carried the weight of someone who had memorized every detail of this place during long nights of cleaning and dreaming. It's rarely used. The access codes change weekly, but I know who has them. Richard felt something shift in his chest, like tectonic plates finding new alignment. "You're asking me to trust you with my son's life based on nothing but your word? I'm asking you to choose between certain death and possible salvation. The rest is just details." The old man looked down at Lucas, seeing not the powerful CEO, who had once commanded boardrooms and bent entire industries to his will, but the boy who had built sandcastles on Martha's Vineyard summers, who had cried when their golden retriever died, who had never learned that love and money weren't the same currency. Dr. Chen will never allow this. Dr. Chen goes home at midnight. The night shift skeleton crew won't question maintenance accessing the surgical wing for deep cleaning. Move toward the door, her steps measured and sure. Meet me in OR 23 in 20 minutes. Bring your son. Wait. Richard's voice stopped her at the threshold. Why are you doing this? What do you want from me? Maya turned back, and for a moment, the careful mask she wore slipped away, revealing something raw and broken underneath. 3 years ago, I had a little girl, Valentina, same heart defect as your son. I couldn't save her because I didn't have access to the equipment I needed, and no hospital would risk letting a disgraced surgeon operate. The silence that followed felt heavy as lead. Your son gets to live because he was born into the right family. That's not justice, Mr. Grant, but maybe it's enough. She disappeared into the hallway, leaving Richard alone with his son and the weight of an impossible choice. Through the windows, the city waited, unaware that in a sterile room high above the streets, Salvation wore scrubs borrowed from the dead and carried surgical tools hidden in a janitor's cart. Lucas stirred slightly, his eyelids fluttering as if he could sense the approaching storm. Richard gripped his hand tighter, wondering if he was about to save his son's life or deliver them both into the hands of a beautiful, broken woman who might be an angel or a killer. In 20 minutes, he would find out which. The private operating room felt like a tomb beneath the fluorescent lights, its gleaming surfaces reflecting the weight of what they were about to attempt. Maya moved through the space with the fluid grace of someone returning home after years of exile, her hands finding switches and controls with muscle memory that 3 years of mopping floors hadn't erased. Richard wheeled Lucas's gurney through the doors himself. Unwilling to trust anyone else with his son's unconscious form, the monitors continued their steady chorus of beeps and alarms. A mechanical heartbeat that seemed too fragile for the glass and steel cathedral they had built around it. "Help me transfer him to the surgical table," Maya said, already pulling. On latex gloves with practiced efficiency, she had traded her janitor's uniform for surgical scrubs, liberated from a supply closet, and the transformation was startling. Gone was the invisible woman who had cleaned these halls in silence. Her place stood someone Richard barely recognized, a surgeon who moved with the kind of confident precision that money couldn't buy. Together, they lifted Lucas onto the operating table, his body feeling lighter than seemed possible for a man who had once commanded rooms full of powerful people. The anesthesia from his regular treatment kept him under, his face peaceful in a way Richard hadn't seen since his son was a child. Maya began connecting him to the surgical monitors, her fingers dancing across controls with the kind of expertise that came from years of practice. "The procedure I'm going to perform is called a biomechanical reconstruction. Instead of replacing the valve entirely, I'm going to rebuild it using a combination of synthetic materials and the patient's own tissue. And this works? Worked on 12 patients in Caracas before they shut me down." Maya's voice carried the weight of old grief. "But Lucas's case is more advanced. The damage to his heart is extensive. Even if the surgery succeeds, recovery will be brutal." Richard watched her prepare the surgical instruments, each tool placed with mathematical precision on the sterile tray. "You said your daughter had the same condition?" Maya's hands paused. For just a moment, Valentina was born with hypoplastic left heart syndrome. By the time I had access to the equipment I needed to help her, it was too late. She died in my arms in a free clinic in Queens, while I held pressure on her chest and prayed for miracles I didn't deserve. The raw pain in her voice hit Richard like a physical blow. "I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be grateful. Your son gets to live because you have what I didn't. Money, access, the luxury of taking impossible risks." She looked up from the instrument tray, her dark eyes fierce with something that might have been anger or determination. "But make no mistake, Mr. Grant. If this goes wrong, if your son dies on my table, you'll lose everything. The scandal will destroy Grant Corporation. Your family's reputation will be ruined, and I'll spend the rest of my life in prison." Why are you telling me this now? Because you still have time to change your mind. Call Dr. Chen. Let your son die quietly in that hospital bed upstairs. Preserve your empire and your dignity." Richard looked down at Lucas. Seeing the boy who had once asked him if they could buy the moon for his 7th birthday, who had cried when Richard missed his graduation because of a merger in Singapore, who had spent his entire adult life trying to prove he was worthy of an inheritance built on other people's dreams? "No," he said quietly. "We do this." Maya nodded once, then moved to the head of the table, adjusting the overhead lights until they bathed Lucas in harsh white radiance. "Then step back and let me work." What happened next would haunt Richard's dreams for years to come. Maya transformed into something otherworldly, her hands moving with mechanical precision as she opened his son's chest, exposing the damaged heart that had been slowly killing him since birth. She worked in complete silence, her focus so absolute that she seemed to disappear into the surgery itself, becoming nothing but will and skill and desperate hope. Hours passed like minutes. Richard found himself holding his breath as Maya delicately rebuilt the valve structure, using techniques he didn't understand but that looked like controlled violence performed with infinite care. Blood pooled and was suctioned away, beeped warnings that she silenced with subtle adjustments to medication and pressure. "His pressure's dropping," she said suddenly, her voice tight with controlled panic. "Is that normal?" "Nothing about this is normal." Maya's hands moved faster now, suturing with tiny, perfect stitches. "He's fighting the reconstruction. His body wants to reject the new valve." The main monitor began screaming, its alarm cutting through the operating room like a siren. Lucas's blood pressure plummeted, while his heart struggled to find its rhythm with the rebuilt valve. Maya grabbed a syringe from the medication cart, her movements urgent but still controlled. "What are you giving him?" "Something that isn't approved for use in humans." She injected the medication directly into Lucas's foreline. "A cardiac stimulant I synthesized in Caracas. It either works, or it stops his heart permanently." Richard watched the monitors, seeing his son's life reduced to numbers and graphs that meant nothing to him. The screaming alarms gradually quieted. As Lucas's vital signs stabilized, his reconstructed heart finding its new rhythm with mechanical precision. Maya stepped back from the table, pulling off her bloody gloves with hands that trembled for the first time since they had entered the operating room. Sweat beaded her forehead, and her scrubs were stained with evidence of what they had just accomplished. "It's done," she whispered. Richard moved closer to the table, hardly daring to breathe. Lucas's chest rose and fell with steady, natural rhythm. The monitors showed vital signs that looked stronger than they had in months. "Will he be okay?" "Ask me in 48 hours." Maya began cleaning the surgical site, her movements automatic and methodical. "The next 2 days will determine whether his body accepts the reconstruction. If it does, he'll make a full recovery. If it doesn't," she didn't need to finish the sentence. The church had understood the stakes, had always understood them. But for the first time in 3 years, his son looked like he was truly sleeping instead of slowly dying. "Thank you," he said simply. Maya looked up from closing the surgical incision, her eyes holding something Richard couldn't quite identify. "Don't thank me yet, Mr. Grant. The hardest part is still coming." Outside the operating room windows, dawn was beginning to break. Over Manhattan, painting the sky the color of old blood. In a few hours, the hospital would be full of doctors and nurses who would want to know how Lucas Grant had survived the night. They would want answers Richard couldn't give, and explanations. That would destroy them all. But as he watched his son breathe with steady, strong rhythm, Richard realized he had never cared less about the consequences of his actions. Maya had given him back his son's life, and whatever price that demanded, he would pay it gladly. He didn't know yet was that Maya had her own reasons for saving Lucas Grant's life. Reasons that had nothing to do with redemption and everything to do with revenge. Lucas Grant opened his eyes for the first time in 3 days to find a stranger sitting beside his hospital bed, reading a medical chart with the focused intensity of someone solving a difficult equation. Morning light filtered through the windows, painting her dark hair gold at the edges, and for a moment he wondered if he had died and this was what angels look like in the 21st century. "You're awake," Maya said without looking up from the chart. Her voice carried a slight accent he couldn't place, warm but carefully controlled. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been hit by a truck." Lucas tried to sit up, wincing as pain shot through his chest. "Who are you? Where's Dr. Chen?" "Dr. Chen thinks you experienced a miraculous, spontaneous recovery." Maya finally met his eyes, and Lucas felt something electric pass between them. A recognition that had nothing to do with memory, and everything to do with the inexplicable pull between two people who had shared something profound without knowing it. "Your father asked me to monitor your recovery." My father asked a janitor. "To monitor my recovery?" Maya smiled, and it transformed her entire face. "Your father asked a surgeon to save your life. The janitor thing was just my day job." Lucas stared at her, his mind struggling to process what she was telling him. The last thing he remembered was lying in the ICU, listening to his father argue with doctors while his heart slowly gave up the fight it had been losing since birth. Now he felt stronger than he had in months, his chest tight with surgical pain, but his breathing clear and steady. "You operated on me. I rebuilt your heart." Maya set down the chart, leaning back in the visitor's chair with the kind of casual confidence that reminded Lucas of himself in boardroom negotiations. 3 years ago, you would have died from this condition. 5 years from now, the procedure I performed will be standard treatment. You're living in the space between impossible and inevitable." Why? The question hung in the air like smoke. Maya looked out the window at the city sprawling below them, her expression unreadable. "Because your father was desperate enough to trust a stranger, and I was desperate enough to risk everything." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting right now." Maya stood, smoothing her scrubs with practiced efficiency. "Your recovery is going well, but you need rest. The next few days will determine whether your body fully accepts the reconstruction." She moved toward the door, but Lucas's voice stopped her. "Wait, I don't even know your name." "Maya Rodriguez." She turned back, and again he felt that electric connection, like touching a live wire. "And Lucas Grant, for what it's worth, you're welcome." After she left, Lucas lay in the hospital bed staring at the ceiling, his mind racing despite the medications flowing through his FL. Something about her felt familiar, like a song he had heard once in a dream. He reached for his phone, fingers moving across the screen with muscle memory, pulling up the private investigator he kept on retainer for sensitive corporate matters. "I need you to run a background check," he said when the man answered. "Complete. Workup. Maya Rodriguez, cardiac surgeon, probably from South America. I want everything. How deep do you want me to go?" "Deep enough to find whatever she's hiding." 3 hours later, Lucas had his answer, and it hit him like a sledgehammer to the chest. Maya Rodriguez, former head of pediatric cardiac surgery at Hospital Universitario de Caracas, daughter of Miguel Rodriguez, the mining engineer whose family had been killed in a Grant Corporation facility explosion 15 years ago. The same explosion that had been covered up by Lucas's father. Buried beneath layers of legal settlements and corporate restructuring, Maya hadn't saved his life out of compassion. She had saved it for revenge. Lucas closed the file, his hands shaking with something that wasn't entirely anger. The woman who had spent 3 days monitoring his recovery, who had smiled at him with what felt like genuine warmth, was the daughter of a man his family had destroyed. She had been planning this for years, working as a janitor in the hospital where the Grant family received treatment, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. But what kind of revenge involved saving his life? The answer came to him with horrible clarity. Maya hadn't saved him to make him suffer. She had saved him to make him live with the knowledge of what she had done, what she could take away whenever she chose. She had made him dependent on her skill, her knowledge, her continued silence about the unauthorized surgery that would destroy both their lives if it became public. She had made herself indispensable. Lucas reached for his phone again, his fingers hovering over his father's number. Richard had trusted Maya because of desperation, but he deserved to know the truth about their beautiful, brilliant savior. He deserved to know that the woman who had given them back their future had every reason to destroy it. But as he started to dial, Lucas found himself thinking about the way Maya had looked at him when he woke up. The careful gentleness in her hands when she checked his surgical site, the genuine relief in her voice when she told him his recovery was progressing well. Either she was the most accomplished actress he had ever met, or there was something more complicated happening here than simple revenge. His finger hovered over the call button, suspended between trust and betrayal, between the family loyalty that had shaped his entire life and something new and dangerous that felt suspiciously like hope. The door opened, and Maya walked in, carrying a tray of hospital food and wearing an expression of professional concern. "You need to eat something. Your body is working hard to heal, and it needs fuel." "I know who you are," Lucas said quietly. Maya set down the tray with hands that didn't quite steady.
"I know."
"You know? Then you know I should call security right now. Have you arrested for practicing medicine without a license? For fraud? For whatever game you're playing with my family?" "Yes," she said simply. "You should, but I'm not going to." Maya moved to the window, her silhouette sharp against the afternoon light. "Why not?" Lucas studied her profile, looking for the hatred he expected to find there. Instead, he saw something that looked exhaustingly like grief. "Because I think you saved my life for reasons you don't entirely understand yourself. And because I want to know what happens next. What happens next is that you recover completely, go back to running your empire, and pretend this never happened. And I disappear again. It's not what I want." Maya turned from the window, her eyes wide with something that might have been surprise or fear. "What do you want, Lucas Grant?" "I want to know why the daughter of Miguel Rodriguez spent 3 years mopping floors just to save the life of the man whose family destroyed hers." The silence that followed felt charged with electricity. Maya moved closer to his bed, her steps measured and careful, like someone approaching a dangerous animal. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Because my father taught me that some things are more important than revenge. And because your heart was broken the same way my daughter's was, and I couldn't let another child die when I had the skill to prevent it. I'm not a child. We're dying. That makes you innocent enough." Lucas reached for her hand before he could stop himself, his fingers closing around hers with desperate intensity. She could have pulled away, should have pulled away, but instead she let him hold on like a drowning man clutching driftwood. "Stay," he said, "please. Just until I'm strong enough to understand what you've done to me." Maya looked down at their joined hands, her expression unreadable. Outside the window, the city hummed with afternoon traffic, oblivious to the fact that in a sterile hospital room high above the streets, two people who should have been enemies were discovering that the line between love and hate was thinner than surgical thread. "Staying will destroy us both," she said finally. "Maybe," Lucas agreed, "but leaving will definitely destroy me." Maya squeezed his hand once so gently he might have imagined it, then pulled free and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she turned back, her dark eyes holding his with the kind of intensity that felt like a promise or a threat. "I'll stay until you're strong enough to survive without me. After that, we're even." After she left, Lucas lay in the growing darkness, his rebuilt heart beating steady and strong in his chest, wondering if Maya Rodriguez had saved his life or cursed him to spend the rest of it wanting something he could never have. 2 weeks later, Lucas Grant stood in his penthouse office overlooking Central Park, his rebuilt heart beating strong and steady as he signed the papers that would change everything. The morning light caught the edges of the legal documents spread. Across his mahogany desk, each page representing a decision that would have been impossible before Maya Rodriguez had cut him open and given him back his life. "Are you certain about this?" his lawyer asked, adjusting his glasses nervously. "Establishing a foundation in Miguel Rodriguez's name. Funding cardiac surgery programs in South America. It's going to raise questions, especially with the timing so close to your recovery." "Let them ask questions," Lucas said, his signature, bold and decisive, across the bottom of the final page. "Some things are more important than appearances." Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, he could see the hospital where Maya still worked the night shift, invisible to everyone except the patients whose lives she quietly saved when no one was watching. She had kept her promise, staying until his doctors declared his recovery complete, monitoring his progress with the dedication of someone who had invested too much to let her work fail now. But last night, she had told him goodbye. The prosecution will likely offer her a plea deal, Richard Grant said from the leather chair beside the window. He looked older than he had before this ordeal began, the weight of almost losing his son having carved new lines around his eyes. 5 years in federal prison instead of 20. Her lawyer thinks she should take it. She's not taking any deal. Lucas sealed the documents in their leather portfolio, his movements sharp with suppressed anger, because she's not going to be prosecuted. Lucas, what she did was illegal. The medical board, the district attorney, they're all calling for charges. You can't protect her from this. Watch me. Lucas walked to the window, looking down at the city that had shaped his entire life, the empire built on steel and ambition, and the careful destruction of anyone who stood in the way. For 32 years, he had believed in the power of money and influence to solve any problem. Now he understood there were some things that required a different kind of currency. I've retained the best criminal defense team in the city, he continued. They'll argue that Maya acted under emergency conditions to save a life that couldn't be saved through conventional means. Medical necessity doctrine. The surgery was experimental but successful, performed by someone with the expertise to carry it out safely, and her lack of license, a technicality. Her Venezuelan credentials are valid. The medical board will review her case for reinstatement while she's under supervised practice at Mount Sinai. Lucas turned from the window, his expression harder than Richard had seen since before the surgery. I'm also endowing a chair in experimental cardiac surgery. Maya will be the first recipient. Richard stared at his son, seeing something in his eyes that hadn't been there before the surgery. Not just the vitality that came with a healthy heart, but something deeper. Something that looks suspiciously like love. You're risking everything for her. She risked everything for me first. That was revenge, Lucas. You said so yourself. Maybe. It started that way. Lucas moved back to his desk, gathering the signed documents. But you don't spend 3 days sitting beside someone's hospital bed planning their destruction. You don't check their surgical site with that kind of care if you're hoping it fails. Whatever Maya's original plan was, it changed somewhere along the way. And if you're wrong, if this is all part of some elaborate scheme to destroy the family, looked at his father, seeing the man who had taught him to trust nothing but power and doubt everything that resembled grace. For the first time in his life, he felt sorry for him. Then I'll deserve whatever happens next. 3 hours later, Lucas found Maya in the hospital cafeteria, sitting alone at a corner table with a cup of coffee that had probably gone cold an hour ago. She looked up when he approached, her expression carefully neutral. But he caught the flash of something vulnerable in her dark eyes before she could hide it. The charges have been dropped, he said without preamble, sliding into the chair across from her. Insufficient evidence. Apparently there's no proof that any unauthorized surgery took place. Maya's coffee cup rattled against the saucer as she set it down. What did you do? I made sure the only people who could testify against you had reasons to keep quiet. Lucas leaned forward, his voice low and intense. Dr. Chen has been offered the head of cardiology position at Johns Hopkins. The night shift nurses received generous bonuses and signed comprehensive non-disclosure agreements. The security footage from that night mysteriously corrupted. And your father? My father loves me more than he hates what you represent. Maya was quiet for a long moment, staring down at her hands with an expression Lucas couldn't read. Da 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 da. When she finally looked up, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Why? She whispered. Because 3 weeks ago I was dying and you gave me life. Because your daughter deserved to live, and I had a father who could move mountains to save me well. You had nothing. Because the world is full of people who take things away, and not enough who give them back. I destroyed your family. My family destroyed itself a long time ago. You just showed me what it looked like to build something instead of tearing it down. Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture so simple and human that it broke something open in Lucas's chest. I can't forgive you for what happened to my father. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to let me spend the rest of my life earning something better than forgiveness, which is trust, partnership, maybe eventually something that looks like love, if we're both brave enough. Maya stood from the table, her movements sudden and restless. Lucas, You don't understand what you're offering. I'm not some broken bird you can heal with money and good intentions. I'm the daughter of a man your family killed. That doesn't change because you have feelings for me. No, Lucas agreed, standing as well. But it doesn't mean we can't write a different ending to the story. He pulled out a sealed envelope, placing it on the table between them. This is your medical license reinstatement. Full privileges at Mount Sinai, with the option to establish your own cardiac surgery program. The Rodriguez Foundation will fund your research into pediatric heart defects, starting with a $50 million endowment. Maya stared at the envelope like it might contain a bomb. And what do you want in return? Nothing. Everything. I want you to save other children like Valentina. I want you to teach other doctors the techniques you developed. I want you to have the life your father would have wanted for you, and personally. Lucas stepped closer. Close enough to see the gold flecks in her dark eyes. Close enough to smell the faint scent of antiseptic that clung to her scrubs. Personally, I want you to stay. Not as my surgeon, not as my employee, but as whatever we decide to become together. Partners, allies, maybe something more complicated and dangerous and worth fighting for. Maya picked up the envelope, her fingers tracing the official seals with something that looked like wonder. Do you know what my father used to tell me when I was little? He said that the most beautiful buildings were constructed on foundations of broken stone, that sometimes you had to tear something down completely before you could build something worth keeping. Is that what we're doing? Building something on broken stone? I don't know what we're doing. Maya looked up at him, her expression raw and honest and terrifying in its vulnerability. Right. But I know that 3 weeks ago I came here planning to destroy you. And instead, you've given me back everything I thought I'd lost forever. So what happens now? Maya opened the envelope, scanning the legal documents that would restore her medical career, her identity, her purpose. When she looked up again, Lucas saw something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Not forgiveness, exactly, but something that might grow into it given time and patience and the kind of daily courage that love demanded. Now I save lives, she said simply. Starting with yours? I thought you already did that. Surgery was just the beginning. Maya stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. The real work of saving someone's life takes much longer. Years, maybe. Possibly forever. Lucas felt his rebuilt heart skip a beat, the organ Maya had reconstructed responding to her presence with mechanical precision, and something that felt suspiciously like joy. Are you saying you'll stay? I'm saying that some buildings are worth the time it takes to construct them properly. And some foundations are strong enough to support something beautiful, even when they're built on broken stone. She reached for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his in a gesture that felt both foreign and inevitable. Through the cafeteria, windows, afternoon lights slanted across the city that had shaped them both. The same sun that had witnessed her father's death, now warming their joined hands as they stood at the beginning of something neither had planned but both desperately needed. There will be consequences, Maya said quietly. It's people who won't understand. Media attention. Questions about us, about what happened, about whether what we're building together is real or just some complicated form of Stockholm Syndrome. Let them questioned. Lucas brought their joined hands to his chest, pressing her palm against the place where she had cut him open and rebuilt him from the inside out. I know the difference between a cage and a choice. This is a choice, Maya, maybe. The first real choice either of us has ever made. And if it destroys us, then we'll destroy beautifully. Maya smiled, the expression transforming her face into something luminous and hopeful and entirely new. My father would have liked you, I think, eventually. I hope so, because I plan to spend a very long time earning the privilege of being worthy of his daughter. Outside the hospital windows, the city hummed with afternoon traffic. 8 million people pursuing their own complicated dreams of love and redemption and second chances. But in a sterile cafeteria high above the streets, 2 people who should have been enemies stood holding hands across the space between revenge and forgiveness, building something unprecedented on the ruins of everything they had lost. 6 months later, Lucas Grant would watch Maya Rodriguez perform her first official surgery since her return to medicine, saving the life of a 7-year-old girl with the same heart defect that had killed Valentina. He would see tears streaming down Maya's face as the child's parents thanked her. And he would understand that some healers were forged in the fire of their own breaking, that the most skilled hands belonged to those who had lost everything before, learning how to give it back. 2 years after that, they would marry in a small ceremony attended by the families of children Maya had saved. Their vows spoken in the shadow of the Miguel Rodriguez Memorial Hospital, built with Grant Corporation funding in the hills outside Caracas where Maya's father was buried. And 10 years later, when their own daughter asked why her parents looked at each other like they were seeing miracles, Lucas would tell her that sometimes the most beautiful love stories began with someone willing to cut your chest open and rebuild your heart from the pieces, trusting that what emerged would be strong enough to carry both of you towards something better than either had imagined alone. But that was all still ahead of them. For now, they stood in a hospital cafeteria, hands intertwined, hearts beating in careful synchronization, building their foundation one broken stone at a time. Asterisk. Subscribe for more intense emotional stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest heart-pounding tales of love, betrayal, and redemption. The end.